Today I'm going to walk you through our process of butchering our meat chickens from start to finish and share with you our at-home setup and how just a two-person husband and wife team can process all of our chickens to provide our family with enough meat for a whole year. Butcher Day is always bittersweet for us. It's sad for the obvious reasons, but we look forward to having a bit of a break from all of the extra farm chores that we have revolving around our meat chickens and having our freezers and shelves full of good meat that we've raised ourselves. If this is something that interests you, or you are thinking about raising your own meat chickens and wanting to process them yourselves, then come along and I'll show you how we do this, and I hope you find some useful information. I am putting out a warning to you right now. This may be a little bit of a graphic video for some. If you are squeamish or don't want to see chickens after they've been dispatched, I don't think that this is the video for you, but I do hope that you come and tune in for future videos where we cover many other homesteading topics. We will not be showing us actually dispatching the chicken. There are many videos out on YouTube that you can look up that will teach you how to properly do this. I will link in the description box below any of the equipment or tools that we use to aid in this whole process of butchering our chickens. So I'll start out by saying we raised 110 birds this year, but we didn't do them all in one day. We split them up between 2 different weekends. So 2 different Sundays. We did 58 the first week and we did 52 the second week. So it's just my husband and I doing all of the butchering and the processing, and we have 3 kids age 4 and under, so that was just the amount that we felt we could comfortably do in one day. And we did end up doing the bagging portion of the processing the following days. So I just mentioned that for frame of reference when you're planning for your own butcher day. If we had a few extra hands, we probably could do all of it in one day, but it will depend on your situation. So the first part of the setup are the restraining cones, and this actually does help aid in calming the bird too, because it kind of hugs around their body. We just have them screwed up onto a wooded post, and then we put a tote high enough underneath it so that when you dispatch the chicken, the blood can drain down into the tote instead of going everywhere and causing a big mess. For the past 5 years, we've only had 2 of these cones, but we've decided to invest in 2 more, so now we have 4, and that just really speeds up the process for us. Since this year we are raising 110 birds, which is more than we've ever done in the past, we knew we would want to speed up that process. So I'm not going to show us actually dispatching the chicken close up, but I will explain a little bit about it. We are so thankful for the life of these birds, and doing this in a humane way and making sure our birds are experiencing as little pain as possible is very important to us. So this is why we do it this way. What we do is put the chicken down head first into the cone, and quickly you go to cut the neck right on the jugular with a very sharp knife. It's right behind the jawbone, and then you should get a nice gush of blood that comes out, and then you just wait for it to all drain out. So because of where you're cutting on the chicken will quickly lose consciousness from the fast drop in blood pressure, so it's not going to feel any pain while it's bleeding out. So doing it this way is not only the humane way to do it, but it also keeps the heart pumping so that all of the blood is pumped out of the animal, which is so important for the health and the quality of the meat. You don't want to have the blood trapped inside the animal and then be eating that meat. So this may take a few minutes, and the bird may thrash around a little bit, and this is totally normal. It's just their body's reflexes. So once the bird is gone, then you move on to the next step, which would be the scalding process. So you're going to want a very large pot, and the water in it, you want it to be around 150 degrees to dunk your birds in. So the point of this is to get the feathers to easily let go, and so you can get all of the feathers removed from the chicken. So your temperature of your water can vary anywhere between 140 to 160 degrees is okay, but we really try to shoot for the middle of that. If the temperature is too hot, you're going to scald the skin of your birds, and if it's too cold, then you're going to have trouble getting the feathers to loosen from the bird. So usually we'll do 2 birds at a time, and we just hold them by the feet and dunk them in and out of the water and just really keep them moving around in it. And this can take anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute depending on the temperature of your water. So a good way to check and see if your chicken is ready for the plucker is on their foot and on their leg, the yellow part. You can kind of peel it with your thumb, and if the yellow part comes off very easily, then you know it's time to go to the plucker. Also, check the wing feathers. Just pull on them and see if they easily pull out. That's a sign that they're ready. You're going to want to have a thermometer in the water to be able to monitor the temperature so you know if it's going out of the target range. You are going to want to skim out all of the yucky stuff that is building up in that big pot every once in a while. So you're going to want to replace the water. You can use water from the hose, obviously, but it's going to cool it down. So we like to keep a separate pot next to it on the burner that's always full of clean, hot water. That way we can adjust the water level or the temperature as needed. So after you're done with the scalding, it is time to put them into your chicken plucker. And so as I mentioned, you can do this by hand the old-fashioned way, but I highly recommend to find a plucker or learn how to build one. If you're doing a large amount of birds, especially if you don't have a lot of hands to help, this would take an immense amount of time. So I know at our local feed store where we get our chicken feed, I always see an advertisement for a chicken plucker to be rented out. So that could be an option if you want to check your local stores around and see if there's one available. Our first year we did this, we didn't have this big plucker that my husband built. So my husband actually modified a drill and put those rubber nipples that you use to put in the barrel. He just put those on the drill, and then we were able to use the drill, and it would spin around and hold it up to the chicken, and it would remove the feathers. And it actually worked surprisingly well. And it served us well we did 40 birds that year with the drill method. So after our first year ever raising meat birds, we decided that we were going to continue to do this every year, so we would invest in this chicken plucker. He followed the instructions to build one of these using the Whiz Bang chicken plucker manual, and I will link it in the description below. He did modify a few things to make a few changes that he wanted to do to it, and with this plucker you can do 2 to 3 birds at a time. And he has it set up so that water sprays onto them, and that helps remove the feathers. And they're completely defeathered in about 15 to 30 seconds in there. And if you rent a plucker or build one that doesn't have the water built in, a lot of people just hold their hose in it while they run the plucker, and that helps to remove the feathers. So when it's done, you take them out and you get them onto your table, and this is where you're going to be doing the evisceration process. And of course there might be a few bits of feathers left on the bird, so just kind of pull those off. So now onto the evisceration process, where we are opening up the bird, trying to get it cooled down as fast as possible, removing all the guts and the entrails and all that, and get it into a much more familiar state. It is very important to not feed your birds anywhere between 12 and 24 hours before you know you're going to be processing them. Otherwise, when you're doing the evisceration process, the crop that's holding all the food and stuff in it will get all over your meat and cause a huge mess. You're going to want to remove the feet. So you're going to want to hold the foot in a way that creates tension on the joint, and then you're going to put your knife right at the joint, and you barely have to push much at all. It just kind of, if you're in the right spot, it'll just kind of open up while lightly applying pressure to the joint, and then you can cut the rest of the way through and remove the feet. And you can keep the feet and use that to make a very gelatin-rich bone broth, or you can decide to discard them and put them in the yuck bucket if you don't want them. So you want to get your bird opened up as quickly as possible, like I said, because you want the bird to cool down as fast as possible. So you're going to make a tiny little slit, and you don't want to go too far in. Make sure you're very careful, otherwise you might hit some organs, but just enough to get through that top layer of skin, and then you can kind of take your fingers and just work them in there enough to be able to just pull open the bird. Then you need to remove the head into the yuck bucket. You can usually just kind of twist and pull it off. Sometimes you might need a little extra help, so just use your knife to remove it. Now towards the top of the bird on the other side, you're going to make a little slit in the skin. It's just at the base of the neck or the top of the breasts. And you're going to work your fingers into there, and you're looking for two little tubes basically. You're looking for the windpipe and the esophagus and a little sac, which is called the crop. And you're going to kind of scoop your fingers around the edges down to the right and to the bottom, and just kind of feel with your fingers and scoop around and try to loosen it from the side of the bird. And then you're going to try to find it and pull it through that hole just to have it exposed so you know that you found everything. So basically what you're doing here is trying to loosen the tubes and the crop from the bird so that you can easily pull all of that out together with the rest of the entrails. So here you can see he got both of the tubes loose and the crop as well. So you're going to turn your bird back around to the other side and put your hand inside the bird and have your fingers tight along the roof, along the inside of the breast of the chicken, and with a scooping motion, scoop out all of the entrails. And make sure you're going along the top so that you're not going in and stabbing the gallbladder sac or something like that with your fingernails. And here he just pulled the heart out right there. That's what that was. And we put that into that little bowl with ice and the other hearts and livers. We usually take the heart out with the liver later, but it came out kind of easily right here. And you should just be able to just go in and scoop and pull the whole thing out and get all of the entrails out pretty much in one motion. And if you had loosened the windpipe and all that before properly, that should all come out, so it's just one long continuous thing from the anus of the bird all the way up to the windpipe and esophagus. So now you have all of the entrails out, and then at this point you can cut off the liver and the heart. Liver, you kind of need to cut it off a little bit, and just be very careful when you're cutting that so that you don't hit the gallbladder sac, which has all the bile in it. That is the yucky stuff. You don't want to pop that. Discard them if you don't want them, or you can keep those. We like to keep them to use for dog food, so we just add them to that little bowl that I have with ice ready. This is also the time you would remove the heart. It just easily pulls off, but like I said, we had already pulled it off earlier. And now my husband will walk you through the rest of the evisceration process.
And then we cut essentially a V along either side of it. So we'll cut here. So we have all the way from beginning to end closed up and in the yuck bucket. So we have that vent, that little bead thing right there, and there's a gland. I just put the knife along the back spine and then just cut right through. Next we have the lungs that are wedged. You have the breast there, the spine has a kind of a peak to it, and the ribs have like a scoop on either end, so it's kind of the same kind of clawing action along each side of the rib cage, or the spine rather. And you'll see very, I feel like you would think a lung would feel like. There's one, the back end, you'll see these where the ribs are at. That's where it kind of holds on. So that's one complete lung. Sometimes they'll break along that, but if you are careful with your fingers and don't have fingernails, you can get that all in one full piece. And the same thing on the other side. Clean along those ribs. If you can clearly see ribs, then that area is where the lungs would be.
And there you have it. That's a cleaned bird. You want to just go ahead and hose it out really, really well. Get on the inside of the bird and outside. And at this point, just check inside the bird. Make sure everything looks good, like you didn't forget any lungs or anything like that. And make sure it's all removed.
Once over, common places, there might be some wing feather tips in here, along the back here, along here. Check the armpits. Quick little quality control spot check. Make sure you got all the last little bits out. Double check for the lungs right in this area here. Make sure that's all out. And that's a clean bird.
And you go ahead and put it in the cooler that's filled with lots of ice to cool down the bird even more while you are getting to the rest of them. So I would much prefer to do the evisceration part versus the actual dispatching part, but for efficiency's sake, my husband usually does almost all of the evisceration process himself because he is just so much faster than I am at it at this point. So I am usually the one manning the cones and the scalder and the plucker. Definitely not my favorite job in the world, but I'd prefer to do that over tripling or quadrupling the amount of time it takes to get all of these birds processed. And then of course he can come in and help me if I get behind, or vice versa. We can help each other out, or if I need to go in and take a long break to go take care of the kiddos, or the baby wakes up from their nap or whatnot, and we just try to work together to fill in the gaps and get everything done. We've found that freezing these birds whole and using these nice shrink wrap bags is the quickest and most efficient way to get all of these birds in the freezer. So we have all these strings hung up here. That way we can take the bird out of the cooler and we just hang them up by their wing, and we can do a little bit of quality control check, make sure we got all the pin feathers removed, and just do a good once over. And while we're doing that, the birds are drip drying to get as much of the water off of the bird as possible before we get them into the bags. Also, this is when we go through and use those large clippers to remove the neck, and then you can just use a knife to cut through the skin that's holding it on there. And then when we bag the birds, we just put the neck inside of the bird. So for the bagging process, you want the wings to be folded behind the bird towards the back, and make sure your neck is inside of the carcass. And then you're gonna just put it into the bag, head side down, where squeeze it, make sure to try to get it as tight as possible to get all the air out. And then you just kind of spin it around and put a zip tie on it. These little zip ties come with the bag, and you can use a little knife, or we use these little snips just to cut a tiny little hole right by where the breasts are, so that way when you dunk the bag into the water, it allows the air that's inside to escape, so that you're getting a nice tight wrap around the bird. So from there, you're going to go to your pot that you were using for your clean hot water to shrink wrap the bag, and you want this water to be roughly around 190 degrees, and then you just take it and dunk it in. It just only takes a couple seconds, and then the bag will just shrink wrap around the chicken, and then we remove the zip tie tail and the plastic bag tail that's left on there, and we can place them back into a clean cooler with clean ice in it until we're ready to put it into our freezers. And at this point, if you wanted to weigh your birds, you could do this now. The bags that we get also come with little labels on it. So in the past, I went and weighed them all just to see how much we were getting. But I haven't done that after the first year, so we just put them in the freezer as is. And I did weigh a few just to see, and on average these birds were probably around 5 pounds. And we grew these birds out. They were 10 weeks old and then 11 weeks old. Obviously, the longer you feed them or the more in quantity you feed them each day, they'll get bigger. So you just have to weigh the cost, how big of a bird you really want to have, and how much you want to spend on feed. I like to use these birds to roast as whole chickens a lot, so I find that this size bird is a good size for roasting in the oven. So then after you get them all bagged, they are ready to go into your freezer. Now, we only had room in our freezers for about 80 birds this year, so I ended up taking the rest of the birds and working through them and canning them. I canned the meat, and then I canned a whole bunch of broth because I had a lot of carcasses left. So I'll be making a separate video covering all of that. So once we're done for the day, we of course have to do all the cleanup. This takes up a lot of time, actually, taking into account how much time it takes to set everything up and then clean up. It adds on a couple hours on the end there. So it took us about 2 hours to get everything cleaned up. You gotta scrub everything down, disinfect everything, and then of course you're left still with your yuck bucket with all the entrails and then your basin full of the blood in it. So you need to do something with that. So what we do is my husband uses his auger and drills a few holes out on our property somewhere and makes sure that they're deep enough that when he puts everything in it and covers it back up, that no animals are going to be able to smell it and dig it back up again. So that's what we do. We just put it back into the ground, and that's a good way to get rid of all of that stuff. Well, there you have it. That is basically the whole process of how we butcher our chickens from start to finish. It is a lot of work on butcher day, but it's also worth it in the end when you have your freezer stocked full of meat that will last you and your family a whole year. Meat that you know where it came from, you know how it was raised. You had them from baby chicks all the way up until the last day of their life. So in my opinion, it is totally worth all of the effort that it takes in raising them and butchering them yourself and processing them. And not to mention, what you take away and learn from this whole process is so very valuable in my opinion. These are skills that you'll always have, and then you can pass it down to the next generation. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, please give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And leave a comment below. Let us know if you're thinking about raising your own chickens for meat, or if you have in the past, what's your favorite breed to raise. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Take care and God bless.